To order. We have a quorum. We have an agenda. Does staff have any changes to the agenda or members? Okay. If not, a motion to approve the agenda as written.
So moved.
We have a second.
Second.
Perfect. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, that passes. We have minutes from February 27th. If those look acceptable, we will ask for a motion on those.
So moved.
Okay, second.
Second.
Okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, thanks, Jill, for doing those. We'll move on to Clara for some discussion items, starting with some zoning cleanup on Tower Road and Pebble Lake Road.
Oh, and I also thought we have a new member with us tonight. I thought maybe we could.
Oh, that's because we did that the last time. That's a good
Yeah,
idea.
let's do it one
Yeah,
more time.
yes, sorry. You're on it.
Nate, do you want to start?
Yep, I'm Nate Cundy. I'm Planning Commission, work for Octo Power Company, Operations Manager.
Wade Schuett, first year, obviously, and with Century 21.
Mike Walls, I'm an attorney for a solar development company called Cypress Creek Renewables.
Laurel Kildee, business owner, retail business over in DL, and then Bob Russell's law office.
Ryan Fullerton, I'm an attorney at Pemberton Law Firm.
Matt Pesek, Lindy Nelson Funeral Home.
That's Jill over there.
Yeah, Jill, you go.
Jill Hansen, Community Development.
Clara Beck, I'm also in community development and act as the liaison for the Planning Commission.
I don't think you're on.
It's
It's on, but it's hard.
Can you hear me?
Now we can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully it gets picked up. I know we've been messing around with the mic levels to try to get the video to come out better, so hopefully it's okay. All right, we'll dive on in. So first on the agenda is the zoning cleanup. One thing that staff has noticed as we go through development requests or talk to people about land purchases that they're making is that occasionally we'll run into places where maybe zoning just doesn't quite make sense, or there's maybe been a mistake in the map, something like that. In this particular case that we're going to be looking at on Pebble Lake Road, I'm going to start with the Pebble Lake Road one. Is there had been a street at one point that was platted. I think you can kind of maybe see the residual effects of that somewhere in here, but it was vacated at one point, but instead of the zoning being updated to match the fact that this is now one parcel, it remains two different zones, based on the fact that there used to be a road there that was separating the zones. So when the landowner, which is Kadam Law, they own this property, when they came and they started asking questions about doing some projects there, we noticed obviously that, oh, hey, you're actually straddling two zones here on one parcel, which makes development difficult because zones tend to have different requirements. So we said, this is, kind of on the city's side, we can certainly get that cleaned up for you. And what makes the most sense is to take it back from the residential agricultural and to a business zone, because it is in fact a business there, and anything surrounding it is also mostly business. So what we're talking about right here is just this little green square will get cleaned up so that this one parcel is all zoned the same.
Clara, is the same issue on that darker red piece there?
That's what I was looking at too.
So, no, this one's actually a different, hang on, I do have another,
So is that spot zoned differently, the red?
yeah,
Okay.
I believe it is. Hang on, I can show you. I think I've got it here.
I would like to say I do appreciate being able to see the background imagery below the zoning colors.
Thank you,
So
yes,
thank
we're
you.
very proud of that change. So this one, that can't be I-3, can it? Or B1? Here's what I'm gonna do. pull up our zoning map.
That green one that's in question, that you question it, it appears that that number is just stretching over.
The
Yep.
green one.
Like it just,
There's a little,
it just doesn't fit in that box, I
In the
believe.
triangle, yeah.
Yeah.
you're talking on the dark red parcel?
Yeah, that red parcel, the one that ends
There's-
in 441001. I think that just stretches over.
Where my documents go?
I believe.
Yeah, that's not the one I'm talking about.
Which one you're talking about the red on the other side, on the left, right?
Yep, and be on the west side of Pebble Lake Road.
Oh, I was looking
And
at
Matt,
the
you're
one.
talking about this one?
Yeah, I was talking about the one.
Yeah.
He's talking on that one. Right
Yeah,
there, the right
parcel that ends in 8,058,000 and parcel ending in 57000 appears to be a irregular shaped parcel with a tail end of it going down into another zoning.
Oh, I see.
Are we complicating your life, Claire?
I just want to be sure, was this issue meant to be limited to the Kadam property?
It does not have to be. I think we're gonna continue to run into properties where we could do some cleanup of zoning. We're gonna run into areas where I think we should be looking at zoning. So no, if we're discovering something else, I
Right.
think it's certainly within your purview to figure out why it's zoned the way it is and if it needs to be updated.
The only property owner that's involved right now that's aware is Kadam.
Yes,
So,
correct.
just so we don't do any surprise.
Right.
Okay, does anyone have it pulled up? Can you tell me what the address
For Kadam's is?
Tatum is?
Yeah.
And why isn't this working? Jill, is this one working, this keyboard? That one. This one's doing absolutely nothing.
It's 1005 Pebble Lake Road.
Okay, thanks.
That's the journal. It used to be the journal. Oh, no, right. No, that's Andrew.
Yeah, that could be one.
Which building?
That's,
Red is what building? It's not the Journal, I don't think.
no, it's Egg
Yeah.
Country.
That's what I thought. Yeah, yeah. Okay.
This might be one of the few instances of B1 in the entire city.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know the history on that.
Well, it's been there for,
Yeah.
it was one of the first things developed out there, would be my guess.
So is that correct that that's the same parcel though from 5700 that has that on the southeast side of that? Yeah. So there's a parcel that has dual zoning as well.
Second one. Is that the, well, wait, is that the same? No.
Yeah, click on the one right to the north of it. So
7000 R2. City of nope, separate parcels.
now when you clicked on that north one, it highlighted that. See?
Oh, I see, you're right. This little section here.
Yes.
Yep.
What I guess is that the city property? Is that owned by the city? So I guess it's kind of erroneous at
The
that
city
point
can
then.
kind of do whatever they want then, probably
It
anyway.
probably actually is all encompassing right away except for some ingress egress to the farm credits or the Egg Country building.
Right.
but-
But we did, I mean, council did just entertain selling this property.
Right.
The sale didn't happen, but in
Right.
that case, we would have had a parcel zoned two different things.
Well, if we're paying the printing anyway and it's the cities, if the city wants to lump it all together, we could do it.
Yep.
'Cause I mean, that's kind of what Claire and I had talked about. It was doing these as they came up, like a couple at a time to save on the whole publishing situation.
Yeah.
So I guess an interesting question would be, why is this one parcel zoned B1? Because to me, that looks like spot zoning.
Right.
And then can we rezone? I would say,
I wouldn't be opposed to taking the whole thing to B2.
this as well.
Well, yeah. But I think they need to be involved in the conversation. Yeah, these could actually, because this is technically parkland, this could be RA instead of R2. Because here's our connectivity to R2 technically, is across the road. This is park. So that might be worth at least exploring the history there. So for Kadam's purposes, you're proposing taking it to,
Yeah, for Kadam's purposes, where'd he go? Here we go. So, oops, that's not right. Here we go. For Kadam's purposes, this one is zoned B2. This zoning here is R4, and this up here is R2. So the idea would be to zone this contiguous with the business zone
The
currently,
B2.
so to B2. So it would technically be rezoning both of these to match this. So these would be, and I say both of these, this is one parcel.
So
Rezoning this parcel to be B2.
so the R4 is there because of the trailer park in that area? Is that to make it fit? 'Cause I think that has to be in an R4, doesn't it?
Yeah,
So he's not opposed to losing his R4?
no, not at all.
Okay.
He doesn't plan, he plans on expanding his current building into this parcel, so it will be a business. And I mean, not the entire building, but he's building some decking and an ADA entrance to the building that would be back there. So extending parking lot, things like that around. So it wouldn't be used for residential.
So are you looking for a motion on each one of these, or as a group, or how are you wanting to proceed?
I think in this case, if we want to do a little bit more research about what's going on here and what this should be rezoned to, we could do that maybe separately at a different meeting. But I think, want a motion to start the rezone process on this parcel here, because it requires, notice in the paper and this and that.
Will this hold up a building permit for us to go through the process?
No,
Okay.
no.
So do we have a motion on how the planning commission would like to proceed on the Kadam property alone?
I'll make a motion to rezone parcel 71001 5,034,000. Sound good? To B2.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. And then next time something else pops up that would make sense to circle back to this, let's just partner this with, have the information so we can pair this with the next time something circles up.
Yep. Okay, so our other area is off of South Tower Road. And this one is more helping to plan for development rather than development has already occurred and we're gonna clean up zoning after. Let me get it open.
Is everyone familiar with where we're talking about?
So our roundabout
Go
is
ahead.
here. Tower Road, so this would be Lincoln Avenue would be up in this area. This is crossing to the roundabout, and then this is what gets you over to 94. So off of exit 55, off of
Like by
Interstate
RDO?
94. Yep, by RDO. So this area is, I believe the annexation process has probably occurred within the last 30 years, most likely. And when annexed land is coming into the city, in general, it's being zoned RA, residential agricultural, just to get it prepared for whatever use it will become. So in this case, some of these parcels have not yet turned into anything, so they remain RA. But the city's been contacted by a development firm that is interested in placing a business here, and they want to know what the city is looking for zoning wise for them to be able to operate. It's looking like it will probably be some sort of a like a truck stop gas station sort of thing, which would be a good fit for, I believe, B2. That's what we have some of our other gas stations in town zoned, and it's a better fit here rather than the industrial, which is across the street, because it abuts a residential area. So even though these are still zoned RA, there is at least one house in here. I believe there's a trailer in here as well. So these are being used residentially, and they would be up against a business zone. There's just, I think, a little bit more comfort level with a business zone abutting a residential zone than an industrial zone. So that's kind of what we have happening over here. Let me pull this back up.
How much of that green area are you proposing taking to a B2?
Let me get it pulled up here so that we can look at it better. What's the address?
Can't you just pan over?
Yeah, but I'm really bad at maps, so I need to make sure I'm going the right way.
You are.
Am I? Good.
Go. Keep going.
Just again, I'm not a planner.
You're doing a good
Doing
job.
fine.
Not a planner.
Okay, now go.
There, you're- yep.
Now go south.
Yep,
There you go.
Yay, thank you. Okay,
good job.
here we go. So this is the parcel in question that we've received some inquiry about. And these are the residences next to it.
So it does
RA.
notch behind those residences.
What's that?
It notches behind the residence.
It does just a bit right here, yes. So, and then across the street is where we've got B2. So if we were to rezone this B2, it would just be, that would be where we're contiguous. That would be how we say this is not spot zoning. This is I2, I believe. Yep, I2 for RDO here. So I think maybe part of the question has been, do we see this as more of an industrial area? Do we see this as more of a business growth area? My opinion is that because we have the proximity to residential, we maybe keep this a business area rather than leaning hard into the industrial. And it matches with the development request that we have so far seen for this parcel.
Could RDO function as car dealerships function in a business district? Could one arguably say that that's a business function?
I think that you could make a pretty strong argument for that.
Okay.
Yes. We could pull up the code and see
And
exactly.
not that that matters right now, but to me, it's not that far of a stretch.
No. No. So this one doesn't require any kind of a motion. It just, we need to be able to relay to the interested party that planning commission is interested in hearing a rezone application, and the rezoning application that they're interested in hearing would be for it to be either a business zone or that I-2.
So for clarification for myself, you said that business district can abut residential where industrial cannot. Is that right?
It's not necessarily meant to. There are other business zones that are meant to buffer our industrial zones. So that's why we would have like a B1 would be a buffer zone. In this case, we've jumped straight to a B2, I think probably just based on the use of this site. This is an antique store right here. So industrial, it can. Is that best practice? Maybe not.
So what point do the homeowners there express their concern?
With the rezoning app, right?
Public hearing.
That would
Get
be where they
notices.
could make
Yeah.
their concerns heard would be with a rezoning application, there's a public hearing required with it, and public hearings are noticed in a 300-foot range surrounding the property. So they would receive a letter in the mail telling them this rezoning is occurring. You can find out what the case is. You can send in any questions that you have or call with any of your questions. You can also send in written comments that would then be read on the record the night of the public hearing. We do sometimes have people come to those public hearings and express their concerns about it. I think that's kind of why I'm leaning toward going with the business zone. It's just, I feel like that's a little bit of a cleaner feel
If
for
I
the
were
neighbors.
the homeowners, I would be not real thrilled if right behind my backyard got industrial all of a sudden. And just from the perspective of, like, I was here when Wyverns Road was getting done. There were some people that weren't so thrilled that, you know,
Really.
but it was industrial, you know what I mean? Like, that was the reality. I mean, I think B2 makes sense. And I think for Fergus Falls, being able to have business go there, it's like interstate access. I mean, that makes sense.
I mean, I'm not a huge proponent or a fan of residential butting up to an interstate.
No.
I think is
Yeah.
is a poor design too. So
Yeah.
instead of letting a parcel sit with no development, I'd say we're all ears.
Right. I would agree with that. And it's nothing to say the developer couldn't go in if it's a trailer sitting there, that land might be buyable. I mean, that's a possibility too.
Yep. So I don't know if we make any moves on the land. I think we just leave land that's already zoned RA alone unless or until further development occurs. But this piece in particular is where we're likely gonna be seeing a request.
Right.
So,
And so then they would pay the fees and all of that because it would be at the request of the developer.
correct.
Okay.
Yep, so our rezoning fee is $650. That encompasses all of the legal description work, the notification process, staff time that is tied up with the public hearing aspect of it, and then any filing through the county.
Are we in agreement that we're open to, we're leaning towards a B2 zone? Is that an agreement that we have? Is that we can tell the developer, or Clara can tell the developer we're leaning towards a B2? Or is there any hesitation on that?
I think if that suits their needs, then I'd say I'd be open to that.
Makes the most sense, right?
I think so.
I don't know why we wouldn't.
Right.
And that's
Right.
kind of the question of.
Yep. And RA is just a holding. I mean, it's not an RA because it's ever going to be agricultural. It's a holding zone. Okay, you guys on the same page?
Yes.
Any
Okay.
questions?
Is that a house like
Yes.
right there?
There's a trailer and a house right there. So that's why we're thinking not industrial.
Yeah.
Because it's like right behind their house.
Yeah.
All right, great.
Do you have anything coming up? Or no, we have another one. Sorry.
Yep.
We have signs.
Sign ordinance. Okay.
We always have signs.
So some of the changes and things that you're going to be seeing, I mean, we've been ever since I started with the city, the hope has been that we'll have a city planner who is here longer than a year and can take on some of these updates to our zoning code that I think have been kind of a long time coming. We just have not been lucky in that regard for the last, I don't know, 5-ish years to hang on to a planner long enough to see some changes in that direction. So we're just going to start having some of those conversations as they keep coming up. I get calls fairly regularly from sign hangers in town, from sign companies outside of town who call and have lots of questions about our sign ordinance. They read it, they don't understand it, it's not clear to them. The actual application process is very unclear. It's not well laid out in our code. So it's a process that takes up a lot of their time and then a lot of staff time having to walk them through the process, try to explain it. We have to make, constant interpretations of what the code actually says, and then have to remember how we've interpreted that from project to project to ensure that we're making, fair choices for people. Occasionally we get comments that it's too restrictive. But that's kind of across the board with all of our code. People will always say it's too restrictive. So I don't know how much water that holds necessarily, but what has been worked on in the past, so with come on mouse, our code enforcement officer used to run our sign permit process. It's been bounced around from department to department. It was with building for a long time because the whole point of the permitting process is actually for the safety of the building owner and then anybody walking past the building. But it has landed now pretty solidly in zoning. It's been with us for a couple years, and I think it will likely stay with us for a while. But our building code enforcement officer has been working with the program, and she several years ago started doing research into what other communities require, and with Rolf Nickelmo had looked into the Hopkins sign ordinance, which has been tried in court a few different times, I think, for First Amendment issues, which is also a concern that we would have about any kind of sign ordinances, that we're not restricting people's right to have signs that say what they would like them to say. So our goal is never to restrict what people can say on a sign, but we do want to talk about the size of the sign or how it's attached to a building. But the Hopkins sign ordinance has been held up as a sign ordinance that works. So I thought that might be a nice starting point for us, just as a comparison point. I'm just wondering what thoughts you guys might have on our current sign ordinance, things that you might like to see carried over. If you've had a chance to review the Hopkins sign ordinance, if you think that it's comprehensive enough, and we can kind of go from there. There's nothing pressing on this matter. This is just a discussion topic that we can continue to have for however long it takes for us to make a decision about an update or not.
So is this, are we talking permanent signs only?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, that's a really good question. There are different rules that apply to like election sign time, and those are set by the state. So, and I think they just did an update on those rules. And one thing that we'd been wondering for a while is the size of election signs. Are there parameters to that? The state has come down now and said no. The signs can be any size that they want, but they can only be up for a certain amount of time on either side of an election. So we won't probably touch election signs unless we're just going to say something like signs in residential areas must abide by state rules regarding election signage.
So like
something
when
like that.
nonprofits, like you'll see like the skating show or whatever will have a black sign in someone's yard, like on Lincoln or whatever. City's kind of okayed that so many times a year. Is that holding true, or is this part of that too?
Yeah, no, we do have sort of a separate process, which is maybe another point of confusion for people. We do have a separate process for nonprofit signage when it comes to its location on city-owned property. So like Triangle,
Triangle
Park,
Park, yeah.
you'll see the black signs up a lot, and that's a permit process. Actually, the nonprofits have to contact Lynn Olson. She walks them through that. The process is essentially like, this is what we want to say. Okay, great. Here's the time period in which you can do it. The signs that go up in residential areas, I believe what our code currently says is that you can have some signage in residential areas, but it needs to be under a certain size. So like the yard signs that get stuck up for, I don't know, pulmonary hypertension awareness month are fine.
Okay.
They're usually
So we're not
about
really
2
dealing with
foot.
that piece of it.
No, our main concern is that if a business is moving into town, they're buying a building or building a brand new building, how much signage can they have? How can it be safely attached to the building? And how do we continue to stay in touch with that business if it changes? Should they want to replace their signage? What's the process for that? That sort of thing.
Do current signs get grandfathered in? Or how does that work? Okay.
Yep, current signs. Hopkins has good language about that, actually, that, you know, we're aware that signage has existed before this, and that signage will just be accepted in. But if you're making significant changes, that would require adhering to the new rules, which would kind of be the same as really anything else in our zoning code. I mean, like, for instance, the flour mill building, technically, according to our code, is 10 feet too tall for the zone it's in. But it was built in 1915, and we didn't have a zoning code until 1960. So what are you going to do about that? Nothing. So some of the things that I like about the Hopkins code is how clearly it's laid out. And I really like the tables. The fact that you can just go to a table and see, well, I'm in a B1 and I know exactly what size it needs to be because it's telling me right here, and I don't have to go try to find a section over here that says required in B1 and then also read the rest of the code that's elsewhere that explains something else completely. So organizing it a little bit more clearly would be helpful, I think, for people. And then also maybe explaining why the code is there in the first place, which we don't really do in our current code.
What kind of sign would go in residential that would be allowable?
Well,
I'm confused on that, I guess.
if somebody gets a home occupation permit, they are allowed to have some small signage on their home. I think it's like 2 feet by 2 feet is what allowed, but it's what is allowed. Like, I'm thinking specifically of like the Matthew House or the new Barbara House. They have signage indicating that they're some sort of a group home.
Did you or Ralph look at any other cities' ordinances, or is this the one that is?
I'm not sure. These conversations took place before I was working with the zoning code. So this is what was recommended to me by Rolf and April. I would assume that they looked at others, but I don't know for sure.
It's easier to read than ours.
Yeah.
Like ours looks like it could be a foreign language at some points. You're just like, okay,
Well, and even if you're, so one of the calls that I got most recently was about signage in a B6 zone, which is essentially like your strip mall. And our language is really unclear about like the front facing of a building. Is the signage only allowed to take up 20% of that, or is it 20% of each individual business? Our code language is not clear at all. And actually, the way that I'm interpreting it is that it's the entire building. But that that wouldn't make sense. But our language is so unclear that you can't say one way or another definitively.
I'd imagine some of the confusion gets technical pretty fast.
Yep.
'Cause
Yep, and
your
that's the
point that
problem
it's
that we run
unclear.
into a lot with our permitting process is they're required to do calculations on the size of the sign in relation to the size of the building, and I would say 50% of the time, maybe, the applicants just skip that completely. And then when we're like, hey, you need to do this part of it, they're like, I don't know how. So, and we help them through it, but that means that they've gone through, they've done the application once, they've turned it in, and then we have to send it back to them and do it again. So it wastes time on both sides. So I don't know, if we can make the code more clear so that they understand exactly what kind of calculations they're doing, maybe that will help. Did I send out our current permit in the,
I don't think that was in the packet.
okay.
What, my gut is when this gets to council, we have a signed person on council. I mean.
We do, yes.
And I think we need to be very aware, and not just because of that, but I think the question will come up with our current council of what is changing between the existing and the new.
Yes.
Is there a way, and I hate to say this to you, and maybe some of us can do it, is there a way to kind of put together some bullet points as to what is becoming more stringent maybe and what's becoming less stringent, and then we come back and we look at it with that, because it's very hard to compare 10 pages to 10 pages kind of thing and know what the differences are.
Yep.
But yet I feel badly asking you to go down that rabbit hole too.
Well, we'll have to go down that rabbit hole at some point. So yes, I just want to make sure that this is the right rabbit hole to go down before we do that.
Because I personally would have to see that to be able to say this makes sense. That's just me.
Okay.
I agree. As I was looking through, I was trying to make heads and tails, but it's tough.
I know, because I was looking at it this morning, I was trying to highlight, and I gave up on page 2, and I was just like, okay, I can't.
Okay.
It's just like too much.
Okay, we can do a comparison.
Other than just maybe being more complicated to read through, was there key points that were of concern with ours versus?
Well, the clarity of the language and making sure that we're not being too restrictive by saying something like if our language really means you can only have 20% of the entire front face of a strip mall covered by signage versus 20% of each individual storefront, that's a big difference. that
It's
we
not
need
so
to
much of what
clarify.
we've allowed, but it's explaining it better.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I guess I would raise you can have party wall titling and shared ownership with shared walls. It's kind of hard to interpret it the way that it mightn't be meant to interpret it, like you are, because you could end up in a strip mall that has, like Ben Franklin, multiple ownership. And so if it's all one building and someone decides their whole front is going to be a sign, then you have another property owner that's getting shortchanged. So we might need to look at it as
Right.
the address, like suite whatever kind of a situation.
Right, and if you have a strip mall situation where it's one individual owner, then it's almost just a first come first serve.
Right.
Whoever sign is biggest,
Right.
if they get there first, then they get approved, and then somebody else down the line might run into.
Well, and with franchises and things, people have requirements on what size signs that need to go up. I'm sure Jersey Mike's is looking at that.
Another piece where further clarity would be nice is the window signage piece, because I think there must be a lot more window signage now than there was in the 60s maybe, and we don't address that super clearly in ours. So sometimes it in some instances requires permitting and in some instances doesn't. So we should be clear about what those rules are.
So are we good coming back to this next month?
Yeah, if you guys think that this is the right road to go down, is making some changes to this part of the code, then yeah, we'll do that.
And if it's not next month due to staff time constraints, when it fits.
Yeah, that's the other thing, is this is something that we can take our time with a little bit, because we don't have somebody who's like, I need this done tomorrow so that I know exactly what I can do. We're making do as it is. It's been something that's come up over and over again that we feel like we should address.
Okay. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Anything else? No? Okay.
You look like you might have a question. And
Oh, do you?
I mean,
Sorry.
well, I don't know. I didn't say anything because I guess I didn't feel it was very worth saying or something. But so what are we asking the city to do then in response to this? Come up with very clear points of what some of the issues have been, trying to marry how to fix it with the Hopkins ordinance.
So the way that I'm gonna approach this is I'm gonna compare our two documents and I'm just gonna pinpoint exactly where the differences are between the two and how it fits in with what we think would help our city. So some of the suggestions that I think I put in the memo, like this is where Hopkins does this well, or this is where we're missing something.
Okay, that seems reasonable.
Okay. Sound like a
It
game
might,
plan?
it might be worth, and I can take a look too, to see if the League of Minnesota Cities has a model ordinance on signs, or if there's any other model ordinances out there that we want to also
Yeah.
compare and contrast with. And I've drafted ordinances before, and so usually when I draft them, I'll take 3, 4, 5, and I'll meld things that I like from all of them to make the most user-friendly ordinance. So,
Yeah.
not, I read through the Hopkins one. I don't see any issues with it. I think it's pretty straightforward, but that's just what my process has been.
I like that. Okay.
Okay.
All good? We have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay. We'll see you next month. Hopefully spring will be here.